Life After the Rams is proudly sponsored by Seven Restaurant and Cafe Bar, located on Pride Park in Derby. Seven is the leading destination for all-day dining, artisan coffee and handcrafted cocktails, where the community comes together to relax, connect and celebrate.
Life After the Rams with Colin Gibson.
Welcome to the second episode of Life After the Rams. I'm Colin Gibson. Today I'm joined by a man who shaped goalkeeping at every level, Eric Steele. From his playing days at the baseball ground to coaching England's finest, Eric shares stories, insights and a few surprises that proves once you're a Ram for life. Before we kick off, here's a chance to win a £50 voucher to spend in the DCFC Megastore, courtesy of Rams Trust, the Derby County Supporters Trust. Simply answer this question via email, lifeaftertherams@backpassproductions.co.uk. Simple. Eric G. Steele. What's the G for? The closing date is Wednesday, October the 22nd. The winner will be selected at random from all the correct entries. Good luck. For more information about Rams Trust, head to ramstrust.org.uk.
Life After the Rams with Colin Gibson.
A motivator, a mentor, and forever a Ram. And you know what, Eric? I've known you for more than half of my life.
Wow. I've just aged in the last 30 seconds here and that. It was going well, you mentioned that. Yeah, well, bear in mind, I came here in 84.
Yeah.
So here we are now. A long way on. 41 years I've been in and around Derby. Like a lot of players that came to the Derby, to the football club, they've tend to stay in the area or they've bounced away and bounced back. Colin Todd's the boomerang. He was doing that. But in the end there's something about Derby that when you've been here and you've played here and you get to know the area, it's for life. And that really happens in terms of being associated with the club as well. You do become really, really a lifelong supporter.
Yes, we'll talk about that as we go along. 41 years then since you moved from Watford to Derby. In a nutshell, how has goalkeeping evolved over 41 years?
Wow, I hope you got a long time, because I could really kill you, bore you to death. No, it's come a long, long way, because when I basically came in, I had no coach at Derby County. I was 25 years of age before I had a really, really top guy, Alan Hodgkinson, who played for England, Sheffield United, worked for Sir Alex. The links between me and Alan were huge. He found Schmeichel. He actually helped me find De Gea. But he was my actually one day a week at Watford when I was there with Graham Taylor. Graham Taylor brought Alan Hodgkinson in, and he was the actual start of part-time goalkeeping coaching. So we used to get one day off, under a very, very rigorous routine with Graham Taylor. His sides were very, very fit. And the day off would be the only day Alan Hodgkinson could come in, because he was doing Man United, Rangers and Watford. So that was my first. I was 25 years of age. I played over 200 games before I actually really had a coach that walked in, planned the day, planned the morning, planned the afternoon. So when I came to Derby, I'd already had inklings then that which way do I want to go? And my big determination was that when I finish, I want to make sure I've got as many strings to my goalkeeping bow to say, what do you want to do? It's going to be my decision, not a manager saying, don't need you anymore or you're injured. So that was part of it. So in my mind, the goalkeeping coaching role was something that I'd always had in the back of my mind, that when I finished playing. I left Derby in 87. And I was back within 4 years when Arthur invited me back again as a part-time. And that really was me leaving as a player, then coming back as a part-time coach. And that was the way it was starting to evolve. Then, of course, rule changes within the game, all of that went along. And as you got into the late 90s, when Steve McLaren, I went full-time in 97. And virtually was full-time right until 3-4 years ago, when I actually gave up the coaching role that I had at various clubs and then also with the FA. So I've been blessed that from when I was 18, I've been paid to either kick a ball and then receive it back, or to serve people and then create sessions. So it's evolved immensely to the point that now you've got full-time, you've got some clubs have got 3 goalkeeping coaches full-time. Liverpool, for 3 years, had John Achterberg, Jack Robinson, who I worked with at Man United, and Taffarel. There was 3. 60% of the clubs in the Premier League have got 2 goalkeeping coaches full-time. I could have carried on if I'd got somebody fit enough to come alongside me. But really, that's what happens. The body says, whoa, what are you doing? As you're getting older, you can't keep doing that. So yeah, the whole position's evolved, and then you've got to keep pace with that as well.
Okay, let's go back to 1984. You come to Derby. What was a typical training day for you under Arthur Cox and Roy McFarland?
A lot of it was down to, obviously, Gordon Guthrie was really, and Roy. They were the main partnerships in terms of saying, what do we do fitness-wise? Arthur would always be, work day would be Tuesday. But you always had a gym, albeit when you look at it, what it was in the baseball ground. We had like that old-fashioned multi-gym. So you had to have, you didn't really need a lot of supervision as such. It was next to the physio's room, between the dressing room and the physio's room. So I'd always been taught, I'd been and sought advice. So I would go in early. I'd go in for 9:30. I'd do about 20 minutes in the gym.
Doing what sort of things?
That would be basically weights, stretching, weights. And then we always knew that Tuesday was work day, so that the AM might be a running session as such, which we were involved in. Goalkeeping wise, I used to just go off on my own with the other goalkeepers over there, Martin Taylor, Andy Quoy, whoever there was. And in the end, that really was, we had to help ourselves to that. Then we'd join in the general training, which would be shooting practices, crossing and finishing, set plays. I mean, and Arthur gave us license to say, you know what you need. And in the end, he had an assistant then called Ken Guttridge, who I'd worked with at Brighton. And actually, when I came to Derby, I ended up renting his house till I got my first property. And he'd actually, when I was at Brighton, he'd started doing little bits with me. And he had no background. So he actually would say, come on, I'll take you for 20 minutes. And then I used to go out into schools and coach. But then in return for the coaching, which I never got paid for, I could use the facilities, and I'd go in the gym when it was winter time in Derbyshire, and I would actually go and work in the gym with the school goalkeepers. But it meant that I got the work, the reflex work against the wall, that we had the mats, everything else, because what did we have? We had the baseball ground, the race course, then obviously Rainsway. So we had limited. It wasn't as such that it wasn't for the one to try and from the club, we just didn't have the facilities. So there I was, going into schools, Duffield, wherever, Ecclesbourne, I would go in and work, say, in return for me working your goalkeepers, they're going to work me as well. And that's how you try to keep yourself fit and becoming, you needed specific goalkeeping stuff. So a lot of it was generated from my own actual background and saying, okay, this is the way I've got to learn. And that's really how I started at Derby. And bear in mind then, in 84 when I came, I'd been in Newcastle, I'd been to Peterborough, I'd been to Brighton, and I've been at Watford 5 years. So you're talking about 2.5 years, 3 years, 5 years. So probably well over 12, 13 years. And that's when you really started to hopefully see, and other goalkeepers within the fraternity, they would actually turn around and say, well, that's fine, yeah, we'll enjoy that, Steely. Come on, we'll do a bit with you. And that's how we built it. And in the end, I left in 87, 88, then Arthur invited me back to be part-time coach with Sutty and one or two others. And that was how that began. I went full-time in 97 when we'd just literally gone up, promoted into the big time. And that was my first year then, when our first year in the Premier League, that was me first year as full-time.
This is Life After the Rams. I'm Colin Gibson, and I'm in conversation with Eric Steele. So you talk about changes, and you describe quite a few of the changes that came about in football and specifically aimed at goalkeepers. And one of the big changes was the back pass rule. Huge.
That changed the whole focus of the game, because ultimately, when you look at the number of goalkeepers that played, look at the greats, and I've had this conversation with Ray Clements, God rest his soul, Schiltz. How would you have coped with the back pass rule? And in the end said, I might have struggled. Ray didn't seem to think he would. I certainly would have had to really begin a very, very big changeover in terms of what you did. So really putting my hat on here for the goalkeeper coaches, the majority of the time you would spend 60%, 70% working on defending the goal, defending the space, which was the crosses, through balls, you'd be doing that. And you'd have to spend 20, 25% in terms of saying how we're going to play from the back, how we're going to be. The goalkeeper becomes like a centre-half with gloves on. So you'd then have to spend that 15, 20% more, giving them the tools. The goalkeepers had to then have the tools. Can they play into the fullback with a solid pass? Can they play it into midfield where the weight of pass is important? Can they drop it into a centre forward? If they know they've got, if I had Phil G in the back pass route, and then I would have no qualms, ball back to me, I'd have just gone, boom, hit the space. Why? Because Phil G was quick as, on the shoulder of the centre half, he'd spin and he'd be away. So you then started to link more and more with the outfield coaching. And that was the big change. When that rule came in, outfield coaches, they wanted goalkeepers more and more into the sessions. So the integration of players, the integration of people like myself became bigger, because then you had to concern yourself with the goalkeeper's role within the team. And that was a massive changeover. And obviously the biggest man that created it would have been Pep. When Pep came in, and obviously competed against him when I was at Man United with Barcelona, some of the way their teams played, and his goalkeepers in particular. And that really began the new generation of goalkeepers. So the back pass rule had a major impact. The 4 to 6 seconds had a major impact. Certainly the back pass rule was the biggest one. Then of course you can now enter the penalty area. So in the past you couldn't go anywhere near. Now all of a sudden once that ball's been played, you can go and try and get the ball off the goalkeeper or the 2 centre halves, whatever. And now we've got up and coming a wonderful 8-second rule. So there's something else evolving. So as if they didn't have enough changes, they're going to now be given a corner if the goalkeeper goes beyond 8 seconds. So again, that will have to be coached, looked at. It's already started. Zetterstrom got warned on one of the pre-season friendlies. 8 seconds beyond, and you only get one warning, boom, and the yellow cards will be coming out. So again, goalkeepers have to change, team coaches have to change, and it's all the fun of being a goalkeeper.
One thing I remember was first season under Arthur Cox in the first division, so about 87, 88, Derby won at Coventry, but Peter Shilton got knocked out. Late season game, John Gregory ended up in goal, because there was no substitute goalkeeper. Along comes the Premier League in the early 90s, and now we have a substitute goalkeeper. Mainly there, again, to cover injury. But I remember a game with Jim Smith as Derby manager at Sheffield United in the season Derby get promoted, 95-96. And he takes Steve Sutton off at half-time and puts Russell Holt on in his stead. That was ruthless management.
It was ruthless management, yeah. And to this day, and I'm actually seeing Suts next week. It was a big shock because, again, I wasn't there at the time because, again, I was doing 3 different clubs. I wasn't full-time then.
You were coaching with Derby, though, weren't you? I was coaching
with Derby. I was doing 2 days with Derby. I was doing Barnsley AM, Huddersfield PM, and then Leeds as well. So I wasn't actually affiliated in terms of come the day, the match day. There's no way I could do that because it wouldn't be fair, would it really? Because we were in the same league. When we went out into the Premier, I'd got promoted with Barnsley at the same time as Derby because I was working with Danny Wilson on a part-time basis. So I get the phone calls, exactly what you've described. I've got people ringing me and they're going, Steele, have you heard what's happened? Jim's took Suts off and put Russell Holt on, and it was in the heat of the battle. Jim felt that they were going to pressurise Suts more and more on the crossing, and on the day he just had this gut feeling. It was good management from Jim because Russell came on second half and apparently he did really well. But that was a big moment in terms of the goalkeeping to say. But it's since been done. How many times do you get the penalties? Goalkeepers hauled off. Tim Krul was the famous one for Holland, sitting on the bench, pull the first choice off, put Tim Krul in goal. Why? He's better at penalties.
I always thought they should have done that in the Italian 90 semi-final. Schiltz, fabulous goalkeeper. Penalties weren't really Schiltz's thing.
Weren't his strength. Exactly right.
Because Dave Besant, was he the sub-goalie?
Dave Besant, yeah.
Who, as we know, can save a penalty or two.
So it's great in hindsight, isn't it? If I'd been there, that would have happened. I'd have changed. But I could just imagine me actually nudging Jim Smith on that day and saying, Gaffer, do you think you should take Suts off and put Russell Holt on? He'd have bit my head off. But he made the decision. And that again was because of the fact that rule changes, we got sub-goalkeepers. That was something that could happen. And it's happened more and more now, because you see the virtue of who's the best in goal come the penalty scenario. Boom, get him on. Remember Kepa arguing at Wembley? He wanted to be pulled off. 2 minutes to go. He would refuse to come off. Big argument with the manager. Stayed on in the end. Didn't save a penalty. They lost the game. There was the absolute hell on. So you see it both ways. He was refusing to come off. And in the end, I don't think his career's gone that well since then, because it went downhill, ends up, and then he's obviously just been transferred to Arsenal. But that was now, and you look now, like I said about the goalkeeping coaches, some of the staff now, you've got 4 or 5 goalkeepers at Premier League level that you're dealing with, that you've got, and again, that's where you have got horses for courses. Certain games, you might just play a certain goalkeeper. When I worked with a great man at Man United, I used to go in his office every first Monday of the month, sit down, and he'd have all the team. He'd have the full schedule. It was a flip chart. And he'd actually have the teams, and he didn't have the goalkeeper in. And he just used to say, right, Steele, I'm going to ask your opinion. We're going to Everton next week. Who should I play? So I'd say, you could play Ben Foster there. And he did. He split a 60-odd game season where Edwin played 40 and Ben Foster and Thomas Cusack played the others. Then we go into Porto. No, we'll need Edwin at Porto. We'll need to kill the game off. And we used to go through, and he'd take my opinion, then he'd go, yeah, okay, I'll go with that. And that was the way. I'd never been anywhere since then where we had 3 senior goalkeepers that were on a rotation. That was my first year. But we had a 65-game season. And he saw the benefit in actually rotating. And so it was totally new to me. But every Monday I'd be there in the office, and he'd so prepared. This is the team I want to have come the end. We've got Liverpool at the end. Must make sure I've got Fletch, Carrick, Scholes, Bump, Everton. Don't even ask me. We'll play Edwin then. Bump. But the other games, he would. And that was the way it was changing. And I'd never done that with anybody. Sven Goran just asked me, who's the best person for the job? Joe Hart. Play Joe, play Casper, play Isaacson. So again, that's where a lot of the coaches, you had to learn. Your job was to give opinions. The manager's job, that's why they're paid the big bucks. Let them make the decision. And it was a big, I was told that very early in my career, and I stuck to that.
This is Life After the Rams. I'm Colin Gibson in conversation with Eric Steele. Life After the Rams is proudly sponsored by 7 Restaurant and Cafe Bar, located on Derby's Pride Park. 7 is the leading destination for all-day dining, artisan coffee and handcrafted cocktails. With a focus on quality, seasonal ingredients and a welcoming atmosphere, 7 is where the community comes together to relax, connect and celebrate.
Life After the Rams with Colin Gibson.
The art of goalkeeping, and particularly when we get to penalty shootouts, and as we know, penalty shootouts now decide big tournaments. We saw it with the Lionesses, the piece of paper being stuck onto the arm of Hannah Hampton, the England goalkeeper. And I seem to recall that a certain Eric Steele was the first one who was highlighted as priming his goalkeeper. I guess telling his goalkeeper, reminding his goalkeeper. Was it a League Cup final?
Yeah, definitely. Carling Cup final, Tottenham. Ben Foster in goal. And he'd had a really terrific game in terms of keeping us in the game. What people forgot on the actual moment that it arrived, we decided that the best way of making sure we know exactly what will happen come penalties was that we transferred everything to the iPod. So at the time you couldn't have computers in the dugout area, technical area, whereas now you see they have 3 at least, where the defensive coach can watch and everything else. This is why they all have massive staff. And in the end we decided, no, we'll have the iPod, we'll have that ready. So I'd work with the analysts to say, right, let's get the main penalty takers on there, which way they're going to go. and we'll work from there. We'll make sure we got it. What people didn't realise was I didn't wait till we got extra time to the actual penalties. Is when we started extra time, I'd actually said to Ben, come and have a look now. Edwin was in a suit and everything. He wasn't involved. Cusack was sub. And I went through all the takers. But the one taker that we actually won the game on was Jamie O'Hara. I'd seen him play for the 21s that 2 weeks previous. And he actually put the penalty to the right-hand side. And so even when we give Ben the information, it was to say in extra time, if there are penalties, just make sure you're ready. When it got to actual penalties, he had it all in the brain anyway. And that was the start. Tottenham thought that was unfair. We won the game on the penalty shootout. Next day there was hell to play. That's cheating. Is that cheating? They were trying to accuse, and we said, what rules have we broken? Has anybody said you can't have an iPod anywhere near? We weren't in the technical. We're actually in the tunnel. And in the end, that was the start. And now they've gone unbelievable what they do now. Frightening. Where they put it on Pickford puts it on a bottle. So it's on a bottle, each one. Name. Hannah Hampton, obviously you saw, she had it on her actual arm where they'd taped it. So each time, so you see most of the goalkeepers go up the side now, pick the bottle up, look, boom, they know which way. If they change their mind, fine. But ultimately, that was the start of just saying, how can we be better prepared?
Smarter.
It was being smart. Because in the end, the way the game's gone, every advantage is given now to the taker. Penalty's meant to be the ultimate sacrifice. You've given a bad foul away, or you've cleared somebody out in a bad tackle. And that was really what it was about. So this was only us as goalkeepers, the union, saying, right, what can we do to make sure we're better prepared? And that was the start of it. And I mean, now you've got the clips, you can have everything shown back on a computer quickly, no problem. But again, it's still about the goalkeeper makes the decision. All we're doing is giving them some help. Anyway, we won the game, got the trophy. And then we played Cusack the year after in the Carling Cup final, and we beat Villa then as well. Didn't need the iPod then.
Here's one for you. Do goalkeepers make good football managers?
On the evidence of what we're probably going to go into, I think not enough of them have took the chance. I never ever thought about being a manager, head coach. I always felt I was going to be a specialist coach. You actually asked me a question once, which you'll not remember this. You actually said to me, do you think you were a better coach than you were a goalkeeper? And I thought you were the only one ever asked me that. And I can't remember how I answered it. But it made me think, because all along, the good friends that I had outside of football, nothing to do, they weren't involved in football, they always said, Steely, you should be a coach. And I'd done outfield coaching, I'd done all my badge in terms of that. But I always said, no, I'm going to stick to the specialist side. And I've stepped up and done a lot of assistant coaching. So
I've got this vision in my mind that when it was you, Paul Simpson and Steve McLaren at Derby, that you were in charge of looking after the goalkeepers, but that actually the three of you work. I know Steve McLaren was in charge, but the three of you worked across the various areas. It wasn't just, I'm taking goalkeepers and that's it.
No, I mean, the one thing that has evolved, I've been involved in doing the defensive set plays, which are vital for me to a team. Huge responsibility. I'd started that when I was at Villa. So I started that 2001 where I went first with, then it would have been David O'Leary, John Gregory first, then David O'Leary. And that really, so for the next 20 odd years, I'd been very much respected where coaches, head coach, assistant coach, we're good at that, no problem. However, who's the first person you're going to ask? Where do you want the goalkeeper to be if they're going to put somebody in front of him or aside of him? You're going to go and ask him. Ultimately, he'll want to discuss it with me. So I sort of like sold the idea. Then when I got involved with the England setup, when I worked through all the age groups, same, I took on that. And you're right, under Simo and Maka, I had responsibility to do work. Maka, when he came in, turned and said, you've got to improve Granty. He's got to know how to play, how we're going to play from the back. That's one of your prime jobs. Yes, he's got to make the big saves, but you've got to get it working on him. And we did. But to do that, I needed Richard Keogh. I needed Jake Buxton. I needed Andre Wisdom. I needed Fozzie. So I would work with the back four. Then in addition, we'd actually come Tuesday, Thursday, Maka was very good on, Steely, you take the goalkeeper and defenders, I'm going to take the midfield players, Simo would take the attackers. Then Maka would pull it all together on the last 25 minutes. So we did, we had split roles. But we knew exactly where we stood. I had similar at Man United, that when Rennie Mullenstein, the first team coach, Thursday morning, he would say, right, I'll lead this. We'd have an agreement. My agreement was I would actually blow a whistle if I wanted to have some sort of say or comment, which very rarely happened because we covered it. But I'd have worked with Patrice Evra, Vidic, Ferdinand, Gary Neville on a Tuesday, 20 minutes only, short, sharp. Similar thing going on with the coaches. So the actual role of the goalkeeping coach evolved, but you had to do that by building trust and by being with people. So I was lucky. I was at Villa 5 years, 2 years at City, 5 years at Man United. All told with Derby, 5-6 years on 2 stints.
You've mentioned Lee Grant from 13-14, the manager at Huddersfield Town.
Yeah.
Brave move?
Brave.
By both sides? Yeah,
very much so. I think brave move from Huddersfield because they had a very turbulent season last year. Obviously, not an easy situation. I was actually in there, and a good friend of mine was the goalkeeping coach, Andy Coy, who was at Derby. And they released all the staff 6 weeks to go before 6 games to go at the end of the season. So they've had a complete shutdown, turnaround, and then appointed Granty. Delighted for Granty. He's been a terrific student of the game. Never really mentioned that he was going to be a goalkeeping coach. He'd always set his mind on saying, no, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to get my qualifications. Credit him, he's done it. He's gone and done his A licenses, he's gone and done the pro license.
So he didn't want to be, as it were, I'm a goalkeeping coach because I'm a goalkeeper previously. He took a broader view.
Yeah, very much so. And I think Kieran McKenna, who obviously gave him his first role, where he could have gone, I think he would have been able to get. I think if he'd wanted to be a goalkeeping coach, he could have got. I could have got him. Two or three situations came up when he was finishing his playing time at Man United. But by then he'd made his mind up. He'd gone in his pro license. Pro license is designed to be a manager, not to be a goalkeeping coach. You could stop at A license like I did. I stopped at A outfield, A goalkeeper. But what Granny did, and that's the big advantage through the system, that when you are looking to do your coaching badges, you actually, in order to get to the A license, you've got to do the B outfield. You used to have to do the A outfield. All the times I've had conversations with goalkeeper coaches going, Steely, why have we got to do the outfield? I said, what are you worried about? Go and learn the game. Goalkeepers now, because as you mentioned, Carl, the rule changes. They've got to know the game. They've got to know how to play the game. So Granty was always very aware of that. So, yeah, big challenge. I think he's done right what he did at Ipswich. Kieran McKenna saw potential. He was at Man United when him and Michael Carrick were actually joint first team coaches. Granty was there as like the number 3. And I think obviously conversations had gone on. Got his first job and absolutely delighted. Done really well, promoted. Then obviously they had the sad relegation. Then Granty's got his first chance. So there'll be a lot of people, because there's only him and one other, which is down the A52, Nuno Espirito Santo. He's the only other one in the actual EFL and Premier League that's ex-goalkeepers.
So, do goalkeepers make good managers?
The history tells you Nuno Espirito has had success, yes, done that. But you go then, you've got to go back a fair way. And we'll throw some names in that people would know. So we could start with Don Mackay. So you're going back to 80s. Scotland, Dundee, Blackburn, Coventry, fine. Other names that you want to know. Nigel Atkins was an ex-goalkeeper. Had a really successful time at Southampton. Then he's been around other clubs. The biggest foreign name would have been Walter Zenga, the Italian, who had terrific success. He was Italy, USA, Serbia, Romania, Red Star Belgrade. He had them where they were the unit in Europe. And then obviously you've got people like David James, who actually managed, people forget, he played in the Indian Super League. He then went back and managed for a year. But that really, without going into some of the foreign coaches, that was it. Have a look at the World Cup. 66 was supposed to be our best ever team. How many of them were successful as coaches, managers?
Maybe Jack Charlton.
Good answer, Colin Gibson. You can tell you're a student of the game. Yeah, you're right, Jack Charlton.
But the rest?
The rest, no. Banksy wasn't interested.
No.
Wasn't interested.
Alan Ball did it. I know we're digressing. Alan Ball did a little bit. Bobby Stiles did a little bit. Bobby Moore had a terrible time at Southend.
That's right. So you look and go from that, Gordon wasn't even interested. I've had deep conversations, bless him when he's alive, he's my hero. I said to him, did you ever thought? No. I love playing. He says, no. He said, I had no intention of doing that. I'd want to spend more time with family and everything else, and he had no intention of doing it. So no, from our best ever moment, you're right, you've hit the nail on the head. Jack Charlton. Goalkeeping, no. Peter Bonetti was alongside Gordon, no. Not many at all. Alan Hodgkinson, I've mentioned, no. Specialised. So a lot have been and done that. Bonetti specialised. So yeah, it's a very limited number. So I'm hoping Granty really does raise the bar and he gets full support. He'll get full support from a lot of people to do well. Not just because of the fact he's an ex-goalkeeper. We have the race issue constantly about, is there enough black managers within football? So Granty again is going to pave the way, hopefully, to follow the Chris Hutons of this world, people like that. So he's double-edged sword for Granty. You go for it.
Eric, thank you. Don't forget, there is that chance to win a £50 voucher to spend in the DCFC Megastore, courtesy of Rams Trust, the Derby County Supporters Trust. All you've got to do is answer this question via email, lifeaftertherams@backpassproductions.co.uk. It's Eric G. Steele. What does the G stand for? And it's not goalie, by the way. The closing date is midnight Wednesday, October the 22nd. The winner will be selected at random from all the correct entries, and good luck. In our next episode, we talk to Roger Davis. That's out on October the 23rd. If you've missed our conversation with Phil G, head back over to episode 1 now to catch up. Thanks to Rams Trust for donating our prize, and thanks to 7 Restaurant and Cafe Bar in Derby for supporting us. Located on Derby's Pride Park, 7 is the leading destination for all-day dining, artisan coffee and handcrafted cocktails. With a focus on quality, seasonal ingredients and a welcoming atmosphere, 7 is where the community comes together to relax, connect and celebrate.
Life After the Rams is a Back Pass production.